Welcome to the Deer Wizard Podcast, conversation shaping the deer industry. I'm your host, Josh Newton, the Deer Wizard. Through interviews, advocacy, and industry news, we deliver field-proven insights to help producers build better herds. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Deer Wizard Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Newton. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. If you're listening on the podcast, we appreciate you. We're at all your favorite podcasting platforms, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, you name it, we're there. Hey, we have a great show lined up for you today. I've known this gentleman for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. Always had good conversations with him. And we get into a different topic today, and we're talking fish. That's right, fish. So if you're in the deer breeding business or in the whitetail industry, you may know this gentleman. He raises some of the best bass across the country. He's got an incredible story, and I hope you enjoy the show. Without further delay, thanks for joining us on the Deer Wizard Podcast. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
Well, you and I have spoke offline about all sorts of different topics. I wanted to hit the record button so we didn't have a 4-hour conversation before the show, which is easy to do. Give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself and your businesses.
Okay. Yep. My name's Chris Methner. I own Blessed Bayou Wildlife and Fisheries. We just went over this, but we kind of broken this into different entities, and really, I should say, my wife and I own these businesses. But we have Blessed Bayou Fisheries Management, which is the freshwater fisheries management company, and Darcy, my wife, has stepped up. She's the COO of that company now, and so she's running that company. And then we have Blessed Bayou Elite Genetics, where we have an access deer breeding program, and that's where our fish breeding program, Little Fish Farm, falls under. And then we broke out with Blessed Bayou Land and Ranch, which is the wildlife management sector, and then I got my real estate license, and getting into kind of the idea there is to get into total wildlife ranch development, from the real estate transaction all the way to the sale, the secondary real estate transaction.
I like it. Lots of irons there, and it sounds like you're completing the loop, right?
Yeah.
So I want to focus in on the fish side of things, because I find it fascinating. When I think about obviously you're in Texas, I'm in Pennsylvania, and I think about land development. For me, it's always, animals, right? It's always ruminants. And you've taken a little bit different approach, at least on the fish side. Walk us through that journey, from maybe school and that formal development of the education side, and then into present day.
Yeah, I grew up. I love fishing, and I grew up down here in Southeast Texas along the coast, where there's a lot of fishing that goes on. You have the Gulf, you have the bays, and then you get into freshwater real quick. And so fisheries was always a large passion of mine. I didn't understand fisheries till I got into college, and they had a little course that you could go to on a Saturday. It was just the Ag Extension Service put it on, but it was called Bass 101. Man, we sat through that, and they, dove into water chemistry and quality and all these things that I never thought about, looking at a pond or populations of bass and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And it just opened my eyes so much to what goes on there, right? And I was currently working, I'd taken an internship, and was working on a wildlife ranch. And so the whitetail end, and like you said, the ruminant end, getting experience in that, but quickly kind of figured out that there was really nobody that did both in house. And so that was kind of a strategy. And once I got some experience in fisheries, and passion was there for both sides, for wildlife management and fisheries management. And so I decided, man, I want to try to be the best I can at both sectors and be able to cover both sectors. As most ranches down here have both. It's just two different companies that manage it. And so with most of your wildlife ranches, they have a fisheries program, and many times the management goal is really really high for the fisheries as well for the wildlife production. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how I dove into it, and luckily enough, the ranches I worked on before I broke out on my own, all of them had some form of fisheries, and so I got a lot of good experience that way.
So bass is king.
Yep.
It's not the way up here.
Yeah.
Like trout,
Yeah.
trout's king where I live.
Right.
But so what is it about the climate where you are that makes bass so appealing for what you do?
Yeah, I think, angler wise, they're such an aggressive fish and fight really hard, and they are by far the most sought after species, freshwater species down here. But they're feeding the way they grow. It's in warmer water temperatures and stuff that you guys don't experience a whole lot. And in fact, there's a northern strain of largemouth bass, and then you have a Florida strain, uh, and your northern fish typically grow faster and are more aggressive. But we believe it's because they have such short growing seasons up north that's how they have to be. Once it gets optimal for them to eat, it's a short season, and so they're just very very aggressive at how they eat. And Florida's, the climate they grew up in, it's almost year round that they have a feeding season, and so they're much more methodical on how they eat and position, and you can see it even like in our fish vats. If we have both strains in stock at the time, and you feed both strains, the northerns bust the forage out of the vat, and those Floridas will kind of position and eat, but they don't go near as crazy, and so it's really interesting the difference between the two. But certainly down here, that's largemouth bass thrive, and so that's a big part of why they're so sought after.
What is ideal water temp for largemouth?
For growing, uh, it's usually between, I believe with Florida's, it's between 75 degrees and probably 82 is when they grow the best.
Yeah, that's warm. I was telling you offline, it was -10 here this morning, and
Yeah.
our highs for the next 14 days, I don't think get over about 15. And
Yeah.
so like everything is frozen. Like
Yeah.
there is just there's very little open water. Even the river right next to my house, which is a significant body of water, is froze, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not quite like you don't want to ride a snowmobile on it, but like I think here in a couple weeks you probably could.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
That's wild.
it's solid. Okay, so you get this you get this bug, right? And I mean this itch to explore fisheries kind of coming out of college. What is it like when you go to a piece of property and somebody wants you to, take a look at it and, potentially put some ponds in? Like what does that process look like? So they call you up, you show up, and where does it go from there?
Yeah. So a lot of times they have a really good idea where they want it, but we'll study topo maps and things before we show up, and try to decide where's the best location, and it's all goal oriented, right? So just like a wildlife management plan, you have to establish the goals and really start managing expectations at that point, and what that property is capable of. That's one of the reasons the real estate end, like sometimes you can head some of that stuff off, as you're looking at properties. And so that was something else that intrigued me about the real estate end. But you can get in that early where, hey, this may not fit what your goal set is. But regardless, if it's an established piece of property, then we'll go in and do site locations, and you're looking at soil, you're looking at amount of runoff. Is it fed by a creek? Are you damming up a creek or not? And there's different things that can affect that fishery. If you're trying to break the state record of largemouth bass, you probably don't want a creek feeding your lake because you're going to get some invasive species, or you're going to get some native largemouth and things that would maybe affect the genetic pool or the overall production of that lake. And And so that's things that we look at. In those scenarios, we don't really want any type of significant water feeding that lake that has the potential to bring in species that we don't want. And so, but
So you're
establishing all that.
looking for springs, or what is that? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
wells.
naive. I'm naive to setting these things up.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can look. Uh, like in East Texas, we'll have some springs and some groundwater, but more of it would be like pasture runoff or relying on wells to fill your lake and things like that versus uh, having any type of creek that would feed it.
So is
And so
there, and obviously Texas is really diverse, right? Like the difference between East Texas, North Texas, West Texas, and South Texas, like they're like different planets, right?
oh yeah,
And so like where you're situated over on the coast, there's a lot of water over there, right?
yes, absolutely. Yep.
Gotcha. So is like like does the water quality change from areas of the state? Is that important to how the fish grow and how they do?
Yeah, absolutely. Like where I'm at, Southeast Texas and all of East Texas, and we work a lot in Louisiana too. And a lot of Louisiana, we're dealing with a certain water quality. It's more acidic because of all the pine, and it generally has a low alkalinity, and alkalinity is the ability to buffer pH, which is really important in growth rates on fish. And so when you move more west and go to the hill country, there's a lot of limestone, and all that water is really, really hard, or a lot of that water is really, really hard. It has a lot of calcium in the water, and it's usually real clear, which that
That's trout water.
that's trout water. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's what it looks like. And and in in South Texas, sometimes there's salinity issues, believe it or not, and along the coast here too, we deal with some salinity issues that may uh, that require management. So yeah, the state, it's completely different. Josh, it's crazy. Like my brood ponds, I have 8 brood ponds on the little fish farm side by side, and 1 and 2 are quite a bit different than 5, 6, and 7, and
Even
8.
on the same property, right next to
Yeah,
each other.
right next to each other. Unbelievable. I mean, that was one thing when I started farming fish right there. It just really opened my eyes. Like, man, it's no wonder. I mean, even on the same property, growth rates can change greatly, or how you manage it can change greatly, and just that was eye opening to me. It's like these things are literally lined up next to each other, and they have different water quality.
Yeah, that's amazing. So why would someone, I mean, I think of water and like on a ranch and I think of it as, drinking water for animals. Why would somebody put in a pond with fish?
Yeah, well, primarily for recreation, and so like a lot of our clientele, um, here in Texas and Louisiana, there's a lot of wildlife ranches, and really the truth is, I mean, there are commercial, we deal with some really high end commercial hunting operations, uh, but a lot of it's not that way. It's more of, you know, um, people that want to entertain their own guests, and so regardless, most of the time, if it's a significant, uh, or if it's a, kind of a high end property, I guess would be the best way to describe it, they're gonna they're gonna want to provide whoever they're entertaining the greatest experience possible, right? And so whether that's killing a buck of a lifetime, uh, having the duck hunt of a lifetime, and then you go and catch the fish of a lifetime, type. A lot of times that's the goal set, on these
Hmm.
higher end properties, and so uh, and we get feedback like some of the commercial hunting properties when they start catching fish, it's said, well, man, it's hard to get them back on the stand that evening, so
Sure.
it's something that I think, it's recreational driven, and people like it, just as much. And down here, you know, we deal with a lot of exotics, and the climate has a lot to do with that, obviously, but it extends that hunting season well into spring a lot of times and early summer. And that's another thing I think that kind of coincides. That's kind of, you're in your prime fishing seasons at that point, and you can still commercially hunt exotics as well, and so it seems to fall hand in hand.
All right, so I want to get into genetics, but I want to understand I want to understand like the water and the ponds or lakes that you're dealing with. So like let's just say somebody has an established uh pond or lake and there's an existing structure of fish, right? A population of fish that are there, et cetera. Um, Talk me through like the surveying process because like that's your first real intro to the physical aspect of this. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's usually the first step we'll take is we want to bring in our electrofishing boat, which is a boat that it has a generator on it and it has a machine that we can control amperage and pulse and volts and it sends electricity to booms that go out in front of the boat and have leads that go into the water, and we control when it's shocking and when it's not with a foot pedal, and it temporarily stuns the fish, and uh, it gives us the ability to net fish, right? And so we want to net everything we can possibly net for a certain period of time and get them into our holding tanks, and then we can start evaluating those populations and the health of those populations. And like one thing we'll do is we get, once we start looking at the largemouth bass population, um, you how many different size classes are there and how many are in each size class and what is their weight. And there's a scale that you compare it to, and it's called gathering relative weights. And if a what that scale says is if a fish is this long, it needs to weigh this much to be 100% healthy. And that's what we'll compare it to. And we can give you a value like your, 10 to 12 inch bass are 76%. They're not healthy at all, and there's too many of them. There's 40 of them versus, 10 of another length. And so, but that'll tell you a lot about the populations. And then as well, the forage, we net all those and we start taking length measurements to see how those classes lay out, like the majority of the ponds we look at, bass naturally overpopulate. And so the majority we look at are overpopulated, obviously. And you have a bunch of fish that are 10 to 14 inches, largemouth bass. And then you'll have no bluegill almost that are 2 to 4 inches or 0 to 4 inches, but you'll have some that are like 6 to 8 inches, and then
Mm,
they're too big for those small bass to eat. And there's not enough food to grow those small bass larger. They may be old, but they're just stunted at that size, and we see that a lot. But we'll go through it, and we also pull water quality parameters. We want to know what all the different water quality parameters look like. That's huge in growing fish and managing a fishery. And then while we're electrofishing, we generally bathymetric map the lake to see the elevation changes and more importantly get total volume, which plays a lot into like aquatic vegetation control. We got to know how much water's there to figure out how much chemical you need to kill it or whatever. Alkalinity. We use ag lime to if it has a low alkalinity, we utilize ag lime to bring that alkalinity up. But we still have to know what the volume of the lake is to figure how much to use. And so
right. So do these like like I guess there's obviously a big difference between setting up something new and like having an existing ecosystem there, right?
mhm.
So like when you like if something's already established, is it an ongoing process of management? Like, is it just like, hey, we got to survey once a year, or we got to keep doing water samples? Like, can these things be let go? How does that work?
Yeah, generally it's ongoing. It's year round, especially down here. Yeah, 'cause we'll stay with warm water all the way to December sometimes.
Hmm.
But regardless, it if you want to manage it correctly, usually it's ongoing. Yes, absolutely. And like for example, in East Texas, where I was telling you, we have a lot of salt water and we have a lot of acidic issues and low alkalinity issues. Well, we may go in and apply ag lime to resolve that issue, but if you get 6 inches of rain and runoff coming from that ground, rainwater has no alkalinity. So whatever it touches, it's going to absorb and it's going to change that again, and so you may be ag liming every year or, every 2 years. And we do try to survey at least once a year on bodies of water that we're managing. And the more intense management, scenarios, we generally do a spring and a fall electrofishing survey.
Yeah, that's super cool. I can, picture a pond where somebody's really, the landowner's really motivated to grow, high end bass, if you will. What is a high end
Yeah.
bass? Give us a rundown of what that is. What's a high end bass kind of population look like?
Yeah, usually it's a lower population, right? Like, so you don't have uh high catch rates because the population is lower. But what we tried to do is scale it to a female uh, proportionate or a heavy proportion female bass, right? Because females get so much larger than males,
Mm,
quicker too, uh, or not necessarily quicker, but yeah, to a trophy size they get there, and where a male will top out early, and they don't get near as big. And so we usually it's a really really high population of forage, different species of forage, and kind of down here the most successful lakes that we manage have a really high population of copper-nosed bluegill and a very high population of threadfin shad and a moderate population of gizzard shad, which gizzard shad get really big, and so they're a good forage for trophy bass. And like threadfin as well, they're real fatty. They put weight on bass. The conversion rates are really good, and bluegill, they reproduce at higher rates than any other sunfish. And so their nest size is much larger as far as eggs than most of your sunfish species. And so that's why they're so important. They don't necessarily, it's like a first choice and a second choice browse on
mm,
whitetail. Well, bass, a bluegill's kind of spiny. Uh, and I don't think that it's really a first choice, but it's one species that's so prolific that it ends up being a main food source for them. But we utilize rainbow trout down here too to supplement with, and they love them. They're just
do they?
the yeah, yeah, they're slick. They're elongated, not spiny at all,
Yeah.
and they're incredibly nutritious.
Yep.
They say the conversion rates on them are probably the highest of any forage species because the protein and the fat content is so high. And
Interesting.
so yeah,
So what's a big bass?
uh, a big bat, any really, I mean, when you start shocking them, really anything over 8 pounds it'll catch your eye.
Hmm.
When you get over 10, then you've really got something. And if you get over 12, then it's like it's a sure enough trophy.
Have
Now
you
there's some lakes.
Yeah, I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say, have you gone out on a new lake and you start shocking and like these 10 and 12 pounders just start coming up like and you're looking at the other guys on the boat and you're like, are you seeing these things?
Yeah.
You're
Oh
like,
yeah.
whoa.
Yeah. 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 I mean, even we do it, a lot as far as look at fish and electrofishing and all that good stuff. But you start rolling 9 pound plus bass up, it will catch your eye. And if you ever roll a 14 or something, then it's just like a unbelievable fish. It's something that you end up staring at. It's like, my gosh,
Getting
these
some
are beautiful.
grip and
Yeah,
grin pictures. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
So now I understand there's a program through the state. I forget what it's called, something Lunker program. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Share Lunker.
Share
Yeah,
Lunker.
if somebody on a public lake catches a bass, I think it's over 13 is the parameter. And you have the ability to call Texas Parks and Wildlife, the Share Lunker program, and they'll come pick it up. They'll give you a replica of the fish and they'll breed it. And so uh, they'll take it and it ends up being a fish that they utilize in their brood stock. And so I believe they have actually um, come up with some common genetic markers in those fish over a certain size, which is really neat. And I'm sure they've implemented that into their breeding program. And since they've also now, as far as their breeding goes, the way I understand it, it's now a pure Florida strain, is what they're utilizing.
I
And
see.
so, yeah,
All right.
it's
So that
incredible. It's probably the most successful program that I've seen come out of Texas Parks and Wildlife.
really,
Um, yeah, utilizing these trophy fish, and then they go back and they start restocking these public lakes with these genetics. And you look at, like, there's a lake out west that's called O.H. Ivy, and the number of bass over 14 pounds produced out of that lake is unbelievable. But I think a lot of that is attributed to the success of that program utilizing genetics.
Interesting. That's going to segue us right into genetics. So, um, you breed fish, you grow fish. I'm assuming
Uh-huh.
you grow forage.
Yep.
Um, so walk us like just I don't know anything about this. So walk us through step one, getting the pond set up into the genetic side of things and how you're doing your selection and what does all that look like?
Yeah, it's involved. I mean, we before we pair our bass that we're going to use as our brood stock, of course, you have to make sure the water quality is right. You have to make sure there's no other fish in it, and so drain and refill, or sometimes my fish farm is still in the process of being fully developed. And so I don't have the ability to, I don't have the wells to fill every pond again. And so I may go in and rotenone, which is a chemical that kills all the fish. We'll seine it several times, then rotenone it to make sure nothing is in that pond, right? When we start putting our broodstock in. And as far as our bass selection, we've for several years now, there's a line down, or I guess I call it a line of fish that a guy named Mike Frazier has, and it's called the Camelot Bell, is what his operation's called. And for years we've used his genetics for trophy management, and so a lot of this stuff stems back to those lines that worked so well in us picking the best of the fingerlings, like the top 1%, holding them back for broodstock later on, and making sure they meet the growth criteria that we want them to, and look and grow the way that we want them to. And so all of that plays into what we decide to breed. And then of course we've run DNA on all our brood fish, and so we know that they're pure Floridas, and we know who they are, and so that all plays into it. And so it's kind of a neat process. It's something that, as you and myself has both spent a large portion of our career studying whitetail deer genetics, and I think in your case elk as well. Uh, Breeding strategies and what all that means, and uh, that's we're trying to utilize that knowledge that we've learned in other species, and apply it to the best of our ability to our fish breeding program. And like one of those things is maternal lines. Uh, I don't think a lot of people don't look at that the way that maybe me and you do, but it is whenever you see it in the whitetail breeding industry, and the pedigrees are so in depth now that you can pick it out, and you see that a lot of the top operations, or even the original lines in certain areas, usually go back just to a couple does, or 2 to 4 does and their daughters, granddaughters, and great granddaughters, and understanding why that is, and understanding what mitochondrial DNA is. And I'm trying to implement the same. Uh, I think that to build a base, like a true successful line, and to pull um, the most out of the traits that you're breeding, you have to have that maternal line, that real strong maternal line, and that strong mitochondrial DNA. And so that's one thing that I think that we probably do different than a lot of fish breeders, just because we've spent a lot of time studying genetics and other species.
Mm-hmm. What of course my brain's working overtime on this genetic thing. So um you have a pure Florida strain of bass, but you made the comment earlier about the aggressive nature of feeding in the northerns, right? Is there an opportunity to hybridize those so you can get a southern acclimated fish that eats more?
Yeah. I mean, so you have, and some groups have marketed very, very well, but it's an F1 basically. It's a direct cross from a pure Florida to a pure Northern, and that's the exact thing that they're trying to take advantage of. Like you get these aggressive fish, and then you still get the long term growth out of them. and I think they're pretty successful at that. The issue that we've seen with some of those pure Floridas, I mean, some of those direct F1s, is the future generations regressing some, and maybe some of that has to do with the tightness of the bred, because uh, if you stock with just if it's a direct cross like that, and it's everybody's siblings, and so there may be some regression there, getting too tight. And then I think, as um, hybrid vigor is going to be the most at that first outcross, and so that hybrid vigor probably decreases some as you breed down a little bit, or as
Yeah,
you
it
other
certainly does.
generations breed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I just look at like I look at like advancement of the breed, right? And I'm thinking like how do you instill all the qualities that you want? And of course you have to use your eyes, right? Like your eyes are your best tool.
yeah,
And then follow the data. I think about fish swimming in a pond and I'm saying to myself like how do you know who's who, right? Is it DNA and like a tag or like what how do you keep track of the stuff?
yeah, we tag, and so
Okay.
they have two, or we use two different kinds of tags. But it's called a Floyd tag, and it's a visual tag that you put it at the back of the dorsal fin. But sometimes they get pulled out. Uh, so we started using it's called a pit tag. It's like a RFID. Basically, you have a scanner,
Mm-hmm.
and you put it sub skin, and and we'll use a scanner to identify the fish. And then we have our data that says, hey, this is blah blah blah, that is this percentage Florida, and and blah, all that good stuff. So pretty neat stuff.
Yeah, super neat. How long has the kind of, we'll call it commercial, you can call it whatever you want. How long has commercial fish breeding for bass been going on?
It's
With
fairly
the
new.
intensity like of what you're describing.
Yeah, it probably the newest. I mean, it probably the last 7 years it kind of picked up a little bit, but there's still just a handful of guys that are really going after it. And there's a group over in Georgia. They're called Titan Bass, and really good group of guys, and they have they've identified some genetic markers that are common in 8 pound plus bass, and really, uh, you know, taking a scientific look at how to produce that, and they're, I think they're making some great headway. But there's just I think most fish farmers for years tried to breed the best of what they can breed, but a lot of that production, um, it comes down to producing mass, or the large amount of fish, and selling them very young, and where the genetic improvement side, I don't think, like I said, I think it's just a handful of guys that are really diving into that deep. But the customer base, it helps, like, especially customers that understand whitetail genetics and how effective utilizing improved genetics is at your production on your property.
Mhm.
It's not hard to explain. Hey, we're doing the same thing in bass, or something similar in bass, and these are what we believe are improved genetics. I feel like they really understand it, and there's a really good solid demand for that. People
Yeah.
are into having an improved genetic, just like Texas Parks and Wildlife is. They're breeding them, and we see the same thing like in Axis. It's really new too, and there's just a handful of guys doing it. But of my customer base, at least, I mean, it cost them a lot more, because it costs us a lot more to produce them. But man, they they want improved genetics, for antlers or fish growth rates.
Yeah. Well, 7 years is not a long time, right? Like
Right.
not in the genetic world.
No.
The cool thing that I found with genetics and the kind of the way I think about it is like there is no perfection, right?
Yep.
It's literally the thing that I think keeps most guys coming back is like you're never going to make a perfect whitetail. You're always
Yep.
going to have something close, right? Not always, but like you can strive for that thing that's close. Like, oh man, that's just an awesome buck, right? But there's always there's always flaws, and the genetic side kind of keeps you coming back. And I can only imagine what a 30 or a 40-year dedicated bass program looks like.
Yeah,
What is the call it world record bass, or where does that, where are they topping out at?
they're in the 20s or low 20s. Yeah,
20s?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is
Now
a big
that's like,
bass.
yeah, they're in California. And but that did not happen until they introduced Florida genetics over there. But they're eating rainbow trout. It's kind of an odd scenario to where we usually deal with fertile water over here. I think it's clear water over there. But one thing with that is it keeps the population low, and then they have these rainbow trout to eat, and so they're growing huge. But private waters, like in Texas, I think the private waters state records in the upper 15s.
Okay.
And there's one lake I know of it's not in Texas, but it's produced in private waters like in the 18s, I believe.
Wow.
Just unbelievable fish.
Let's get into the prey species before we wrap this up. So what is prey species? Forage stock, excuse me.
Right?
What what are these? You mentioned a couple, like the copper nose bluegill, is that what we said?
Uh-huh.
And then those couple shad species, the thread fins. So you grow those, you stock feeders. Like what does that program look like?
Yeah, so we grow copper-nosed bluegill and we utilize red ear sunfish as well. It's another perch basically that they don't reproduce at the rates that bluegill do, but they don't directly compete with them. And
Hmm.
then they also eat snails, and some of your parasites spend a portion of their life cycle on a snail, and so they help with parasite control. And they're fun to catch; they get big, and so we
What's
use
big?
red
Like
ear.
as big as your hand?
Yeah, yeah, even bigger. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
really?
So they get a few pounds if they really big, And so red ear, and then we also use fathead minnows, which is a just a kind of a slow minnow that it doesn't stick around long, but if it's a new body of water, they're very important in growing your fingerlings to the next stage. And that's something that we really try to dial into, right? Like if we're going to try, if we're in a really intense trophy management scenario, then at every single life stage of that bass, we want it growing the most it possibly can, right? And
Hmm.
so that goes all the way from fry, you know, that's they're eating zooplankton at a fry stage, and so we got to make sure our zooplankton counts are there, and then they transition getting them to fingerlings past that fingerling stage to where they can eat bluegill. We really depend on fathead minnows and making sure at that point of their life cycle there's a really high population of fathead minnows. And then generally the fatheads are kind of slow and dumb, and they get smoked, they get eaten and are no longer in existence. And so we've got our bluegill population thriving and our threadfin shad population thriving, and it bumps them to that next size class. And then trying to manage for really large forage species where a trophy bass can be lazy and just eat. It doesn't have to constantly eat and burn calories. It can stage along some type of structure and gulp something big down and put on weight. And so, but it's really important. Any of those you miss, the overall potential, the end potential decreases, right? Any growing cycle you miss. And so we try to make sure that every one of those size classes they get the most they possibly can out of it.
So when you go into a place, you got a 5 or a 10-year plan, it sounds like, to
Yeah.
keep working through these stages.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. Yep.
Um, just I guess from a personal standpoint, which do you prefer? Do you prefer setting up a new facility, or do you like working with the existing water structures already?
That new is so much easier.
Well, I didn't
It
say what
just,
was easier. I was asking
yeah,
you
well,
what
I
you like
prefer it
better.
too. Yeah. Yeah. No,
I
I
gotcha.
do. The reason I do is because you have full control over that forage population. And once you have an established bass population, there's such a vicious predator that it is hard to revert that ratio to get the forage base high enough to really grow those fish.
I see.
And so, I mean, there's times where we'll kill the lake out, start over for that reason.
Really?
But if I have the ability to go in and stock all my forage and delay stocking bass and allow those forage species to reproduce and grow without any predators, and then put my bass in, it's at a population where my growth rates are going to be really high. And so the production's usually much better, whenever
Gotcha.
you're
Probably makes
broadening
the
them.
end goal for the client a lot better too, right? Because
Yeah.
you're just like licking, as a breeder, right? You're just like licking your chops, like, buddy, you have no idea what's coming your way. You're
Yeah,
gonna have some
that's right.
freaking trophy fish here in no time.
Yeah. And
Um,
sometimes we can get it there quicker,
yeah.
than
What is that
trying to manage.
timeline? From we got water and we're catching 5-6 pound bass.
Yeah. So if you put 2 to 3 pounds of body weight on a bass a year, you're doing really well,
Two to
especially
three
for,
pounds a year.
yes. Yeah.
Whoa.
That's pushing the parameters. A normal growth rate would be about a pound a year.
Gotcha.
Um, That, like my personal lake, those bass were stocked in 2023 at 2 inches in the summer, like July, and there's some over 6 now, 6 pounds.
Whoa.
Yeah,
That's
but
incredible.
we're pushing them. I
Well,
mean, they're,
sure.
yeah,
Well, that's your job.
yeah, that's
I
right. Yeah.
suspect those are getting selected out. Like, when do you select for your breeders? How does that, like, will you pull a 6 pounder that grew in 2 years and be like, oh, this is the top stock? Or are you only breeding with, established 10 pounders or,
Yeah, so both. We do
okay.
both. But most of my brood stock is separate from the lake. Now, if it's something really, incredibly exceptional out of the lake, then I'll bring it into the brood stock. But most of my brood stock stays in the farm. And so once we get finished breeding them, it's kind of like our deer. I put them in a certain pond and I keep them fed and healthy, and then get ready to breed the next year. And then each year, um, I hold back my best growth rates on that year's fish.
I see.
And then those, if once they get to sexual maturity, then if they're showing what I want to see, then I start implementing them in as well.
So do they, like, what, I have so many questions. When you got your brood pond, how many of like, is there only two bass in there, a male and a female, or is
We've
there,
done it both. Yeah, we've taken like this last year. I took what I felt like was my very best female, my very best male, and and put them in there. But in most scenarios, um, we may put one female, but a handful of males in there. The males make the nest, and
okay.
so you can get multiple spawns off of her. And we've also taken it where we have a few females. The where you run into an issue is once those bass, once they convert to a fingerling, and kind of in early summer or midsummer, you'll have some they call jumpers. They grow much quicker. Well, they start eating. They start cannibalizing.
Gotcha.
And if you wait too late, or if you have bass born at different times, um, the older bass may demolish the population in there, and so it's tricky having multiple females in there. And even with just one female, one male, I mean, you're still, like I said, you're going to have some that grow faster. They're not older. They're going to grow faster,
Yeah.
and they're going to start eating others, and if you wait till August to harvest those, you're going to have a handful of bass left,
Yeah,
that are
right.
exceptional, but they're just not many of them.
What so, like, I know, like, I did some work at a trout hatchery for a few years. So, like, all those breedings are column manually represented, right? So, like, you're picking your stock out, you're literally squeezing the sperm and the eggs out, and they're breeding in, I forget the machine that it's used, but, like, they're
Right.
in trays, and then they're grown, like, they're hatched and grown in trays. That's not what you're doing.
No, that's not. Yeah, we actually breed them in the brood ponds.
Can you do
Uh,
that or no?
yeah, well, so what you see a lot of times, and we're hopefully this year our goal is to build a bigger fish house up there at the fish farm. Right now, our fish vats are at another location at our office. But once we build those, I think we'll shift some to where we're actually breeding in an indoor facility.
Hmm.
They have these mats. They're called spawning mats.
Okay.
And so you lay these mats down, they spawn on the mat, and then you can take the fry and move them to a brood pond and grow them out in it. So that's something that as we grow, we'll probably implement. But as of right now, we breed them in a little pond. It equates to about a 3/4 acre pond.
That's little, three
Yeah,
quarter acre.
3/4
Okay,
acre. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
gotcha.
we
So
have seine, like we have 150-foot seine is how we harvest, but it has to be pulled with a piece of equipment on each side.
right,
It's kind of tricky harvesting those things too,
yeah.
without running into issues, bacterial issues and things.
Well, that's super cool. I could talk to you for hours about bass, but I appreciate you coming on and talking about this. We'll make sure that all the links to Blessed Bio are down in the show notes there. You can check out Chris's operation, and I'm sure he'd be happy to work with you if you wanted to get set up with a new pond, have a survey done on an existing pond. The guy grows some fish. Check him out. So, Chris, I appreciate you taking the time today, and always look forward to having you back on the show. So, thank
Yeah,
you.
man, I appreciate it as well. I look forward to it as well.
You bet. Stay tuned for another episode of the Deer Wizard podcast.